Welcome everybody to week 3 of our backpack sew along, which covers quilting and cutting. So if you're just joining us in the sew along, you're just in time to start making a backpack. I apologize to those people who thought they missed this week's live. It's just a little later in the day. You know, recovering from the holiday weekend has been a little exhausting and I'm just tired. And I was like, okay, I should announce the time for the sew along, but I just had no idea when I would be ready to go live for the sew along today. So here we are. So I apologize for people who like to know. Hopefully next week I can plan a time and let you know a little bit more in advance. But as always, this video will be saved to my feed and you can watch the replay on YouTube as well. I'll be posting it later on YouTube. That is why it is filmed this way for Instagram. So I apologize for people who like the full screen for YouTube, but I do still think it's better to watch on YouTube for the replay because you can speed it up and pause it and, you know, all of that a little bit easier functionality than Instagram. So for week 1, we were collecting our supplies. Week 2, we were fussy cutting our pockets with Christina from Fabric Pop. So I hope that you got a chance to tune in there. Even if you're not fussy cutting for this particular project, she gave us some really, really great tips, and I am so excited to do the fussy cutting. I didn't get that done last week, so I'm a little behind already on my own sew along, but I am making like 3 backpacks, so I'm ahead on parts and behind on parts, so I'm still planning on doing the fussy cut pocket, hopefully this week. So we are doing the violet backpack, which is the small one, and the Archie backpack, which is the large one. And today we're going to just talk about some quilting and cutting tips. So if you have questions, as always, drop them in the comments and I would love to answer your questions. I haven't shared this version of the backpack on our Instagram lives yet. I don't think I have, at least. And I love this one. This is probably one of my favorite Archie backpacks I've made so far because I just used leftover quilted fabric I had from other bag projects. So it's all kind of mixed and matched together. And part of the reason that I did that was because this was my very first Archie backpack I made. It was my first prototype, and I really wanted to try out the size before I wrote a pattern. So I was like, I've got to make one. And so I took this to QuiltCon. The last 2 years I've taken it to QuiltCon, and I've really liked it for QuiltCon. And so I've always wanted to do another like kind of color blocked backpack since then. So I'm going to show you what I have picked for my Archie backpacks for this round. I've shared it on all of them, but I finally have it cut. So this is canvas speckled from Ruby Star Society that will be out the end of the year and or the beginning of next year. I think it's the beginning of next year. So my back is going to be the green speckled. My front is going to be the black speckled. I got my side pockets cut. So those will be the side pockets. And then my gusset is going to be this like light pink, and then the bottom gusset is going to be this washi canvas because I ran out of speckled. I didn't have enough. So speckled canvas, but I actually really like this washi. It's a little bit darker, which will be nice, and it's also canvas, so it will all still be canvas. And then I'm going to fussy cut my pocket for that, but I'm going to just share the quilting tips first. I guess I'll share the quilting tips first. That makes sense. Quilting tips first. And then we're going to talk about cutting because I already shared those pieces that I cut. So in the pattern, I wonder if I have a... Yeah. In the pattern, you get one of these sheets that has like all of the pieces that you need and the templates that you need, right? So you can cut up all of those little pieces and cut them out. So I have all of my pieces cut out. So here's my strapping for my violet backpack. I have my interfacing ready to go, and my handles and my hardware tabs. So I have everything ready to go here. All cut out, all my accent fabric. And these little tabs are so helpful to just kind of keep you organized in the process. So both patterns include those little tags, so I would recommend using them because I think you'll really enjoy having those tabs to keep you organized as you're cutting and preparing for your bag, to make your bag. So I got all my accent cut out for this one. This one's ready to go. I wanted to share two things that I did a little bit different than normal. And I was going to have a sample on a violet backpack, but I don't have one because I sent it for a trunk show. And this is something that I've learned since making these patterns as well. You always improve, right? Not even improve. It was just a different technique, a different skill. I should show I just had the thought. Okay, I'll show you on this one because it's like super clear to see. So you can see this is your accent fabric. So this is your zipper binding. I just wanted to call it the right name. This is your zipper binding. And I ended up cutting 2 of those, and I'm going to show you a different look that you can get by cutting 2. And you can bind the top edge of your pocket and then attach the zipper and then bind the top, which we'll talk about this next week. But since we're talking about cutting, I wanted to talk about what I cut different. So I cut 2 of these bindings. So I'm going to bind this pocket first, and then it will make it very easy to be a spot to attach a little label to, which will be really fun. Anyway, so I wanted to let you know that tip, that if you want to cut an extra zipper binding and bind the top edge of your pocket before you add your zipper to it, that is an alternative method that works really, really great. So I also was at a local quilt shop to me, Corn Wagon Quilts. If you're in Utah, it's in Springville, Utah. It's such a darling shop, and they have a bag maker who I have yet to meet. Her name is Shelly, and she makes and teaches a lot of my patterns in the shop, and she does such a good job. And she made an everyday quilted tote, which I'm now realizing I should have had one here. I don't have one here, but and that's how the everyday quilted tote is. If you want to look at how this will look with the binding, it's the pockets bound, and then you add the zipper and then add the bottom. But she had a little ruffle added to it, and it's so cute. So I actually cut a ruffle out too, because I'm going to give you the dimensions. I'll share these in the email. If you want to add a little ruffle to the bottom edge of your pocket here. But I'll show you guys how to do it next week, but I'll give you the cutting dimensions for it this week. Next week we're doing zippers and pockets, so that's what we're covering in our live next week. Anyways, so whenever I do a ruffle, I usually do 1.5 times. That's about how ruffly I like it, 1.5 times. So I just took my width of my bag and then I added another half of that width. That's how I decided how wide to make my ruffle for this bag. But I'm very excited to show you that because I've seen it now on a few bags where they just make a little teeny ruffle on the pocket. So anyways, those are the 2 things I changed for my cutting for this round. All right, so that is our cutting, our accent cutting. So for quilting, I just wanted to talk about some of my favorite quilting tools. I am a long arm quilter, so a lot of fabric I long arm quilt. And so I wanted to talk about if you're sending your fabric out for long arm quilting. If you have a favorite long arm quilter, I'm sure they would love to quilt fabric for you as well as your quilts. We do a lot of quilting on fabric yardage. And so I just wanted to share some tips on that because it's different, and I would talk to your quilter because everyone is comfortable with different things, and so it's just helpful to know what their expectations are before you send fabric just for quilting. But I wanted to share some tips that I think are super helpful for long arm quilting. Some long arm quilters will require your backing fabric or your lining fabric to be bigger than your main fabric. That's definitely the easiest for loading on a long arm. But I'm always happy to quilt 2 pieces of fabric exactly the same, only for bags, not for quilts, because for quilts I want to be able to quilt really nice to the edge. But for bags, it's like your selvage edges are on the edge and you can cut it off, so if it's not as nice, it's like, okay. And soft and stable is what we use to, in these bags. We use soft and stable quilted inside the layer of these bags, or the fabrics. I carry soft and stable on the roll, so it's really nice for me because then I don't have to steam out any of the creases that are in the packaging. and then I have it, and then you don't have to ship it. You don't have to pay the extra shipping cost to ship it to me or whatever. Also, so I'm happy to use my Soft and Stable on the roll. Soft and Stable comes about 59 inches wide, which is really nice because it's just a huge piece. But I've learned a few tips over the years of quilting Soft and Stable, how to utilize the best like space for quilting Soft and Stable. So when people ask like how much should I send, or can I send like a fat quarter, or can I send a half a yard, and my answer is yes, you can send any size of fabric. I could quilt any size of fabric, and I'm sure your long arm quilter could quilt any size of fabric. But is it practical? No, because we all have minimum charges for loading, because it takes about the same amount of time to load a baby quilt as it does a king size quilt. So we have like a minimum charge. And my minimum charge is $50 for quilting. So it wouldn't be worth it to you to send a fat quarter for quilting for $50, right? Not worth it. So the amount that I have found that I feel like is a little bit of a sweet spot for quilting is about 1.5 yards, because 1.5 yards is about 54 inches wide. So then you have 59 inches of Soft and Stable, and then I can just cut you like a yard and a yard and a quarter. A yard and a quarter of Soft and Stable is 45 inches, right? So I can cut like 1.25 yards of Soft and Stable, and you can quilt the whole piece of Soft and Stable, which is really nice because then you don't have leftover pieces of Soft and Stable. It's just all quilted. That being said, if your lining is like maybe 59 inches, like 1.5 yards is 54 inches a yard. If you have extra fabric and you get like 59 inches, that gives us a little bit to the top and bottom, and then you get most of the 54 inches quilted, right? And I know I'm talking a lot about this, but I just want to share a few more tips, because I know maybe some of them you aren't interested in quilting, having your fabric quilted on Soft and Stable, but I always tell people, if you're like, oh, I don't want 1.5 yards quilted of one fabric, that's okay too, because we can float the top. So I always say, send 1.5 yards of a lining that you love, like a cute lining. So I really like light linings, so like something like this. And then you could send a bunch of different fabrics for the top. You could send 6 fat quarters and 1.5 yards of this. And then you could have fat quarters quilted for smaller bag projects or whatever. Obviously a fat quarter isn't enough for the Violet backpack or the Archie backpack, but a fat quarter is enough for Auntie Grace or Athena crossbody. Some of my other patterns I have that take literally a quilted fat quarter. So something like that, or even there's some other designers that have some really great pouches, like Christina from Center Street Quilts, if you haven't made the Holland pouch. I think that takes a fat quarter quilted. I'm not exactly positive off the top of my head, but something like that. But if you're like, oh, I need 1 yard of fabric for an Archie backpack and 1/2 yard for a Violet backpack, and you want them different, but a lining could work for the same, you could send 1.5 yards of lining, and then 1 yard for your Archie and 1.5 yard for your Violet backpack, and quilt them. And I am always happy to do different designs and change the thread, because I just am like, I like those details, like that makes a difference, right? So I'm sure if you talk to your long arm quilter that they could work with you there. So okay, I know I spent too much time talking about long arm quilting, but I just want people to know that that is a possibility, and I'm sure your long arm quilters would love to help you out with that. If they don't stock Soft and Stable on the roll, Soft and Stable is amazing because you can just use a steam iron, and all the creases from the packaging from being folded will pop right out. So just so you know, as you're preparing to quilt your fabric for this bag, I always steam my Soft and Stable before, because it just gives it's nice and flat. So I have my fabric here prepped and ready to go for quilting. I have 1/2 yard of fabric here, so I know it's a big piece. So I am doing this cute little strawberry on the outside and this cute check on the inside. This is Color Pop Playground. This is a fabric from KP Creates for Andover Fabric. This is her first fabric collection. It is shipping to stores in October, so be sure to find it. And of course, this is my accent for it, so those will be my handles and my bindings and my little ruffle, because I'm going to add the ruffle. So I'm very excited about how that's going to look. So the way I like to quilt Soft and Stable is to just iron my fabric to the Soft and Stable. And I know that that sounds silly, but I just like to use my steam iron, iron it in place, and pin it. And that has worked for me for years. And I know that some people are going to say, oh, but my fabric shifted and it's loose. And it is, but I feel like if I start in the center and smooth it out, it usually works really, really great. So I have my flathead pins. These flower head flathead pins are my favorite ones because I feel like they just stay out of the way. And I picked this fabric for the lining because I am going to quilt grids. I just loaded enough backing for 3.5 yards for 3 violets. That's perfect. It's so great to be able to just load up a huge piece of fabric on your long arm and then just quilt a bunch. So I can't wait to see your backpacks. It's so fun. Anyway, so those quilting on domestic, part of why I picked this fabric is because I think it's going to be so awesome to quilt. So I think what I'm going to do is quilt. I'll let you know because I haven't quite decided. I don't think I'm going to quilt 1/2 inch squares. I think I'm going to do like either 1 inch or I don't know exactly, but I'm going to share a video of my process of this later in the week so you can see how I'm going to quilt this on my domestic, because I know people are interested in quilting on the domestic. So so I have that all pinned in place, and like I said, I just ironed it and pinned it. That's all I did. But I am going to show a few other ways. I have used this June Taylor's basting spray, and I really like this as well. I just am often too lazy to walk outside to do this, and I don't like spraying it in my house. So I do have this on hand, and it works great. So if you're like, oh, I'm too nervous to just like smooth this out with my hands and you want it to be a little bit more secure, this is great. And it is readjustable. You can spray it and then move it as you need. And you don't need a lot. You can you want to shake it, and about 10 to 12 inches, this is the directions, and then smooth it and spray it as you go and move it along. And so then you can do the backing and then the front. This is a great option if you are wanting to spray baste it. And because everyone always asks, there are other products other than Soft and Stable that you can use. There's Bosal and there's Pellon Flex Foam, and I'm pretty sure the Bosal has a fusible one, a fusible foam. I've never tried it, so I can't tell you if I like it or not because I haven't tried it. And part of the reason I haven't tried it is because I worked for Annie for just over 3 years. I love her product. I love how thick it is. I love the soft fabric lining on it. I feel like I've seen sometimes when you iron interfacing to fabric, like fusible fleece, sometimes this is Annie's line. She would always used to say, I don't want my fabric to look like my thighs, like all cellulite, which is really funny. Anyways, but sometimes the fusible will give that like textured look to your fabric, and so I haven't tried it for that reason because I'm like, oh, I'm not that interested and I feel comfortable doing it this way. If you like it, do it. I'm not discouraging anyone from using any of the products that they like. Do it, because I think that it's all these products are great and everyone has their methods that they do. So if you like to do it, do it. Great question. Can I cut the pieces front separately and quilt them? Yes. I'm so glad you asked that question because I was going to share that, but I had totally missed it. So if you're feeling like, oh, I don't feel comfortable quilting a 1/2 yard of fabric on my machine, if this is too big of a piece for you to feel comfortable quilting on your machine, then you absolutely can cut the pieces for like your backpack front, your backpack back, your pocket, and your gussets. You could cut them separately. You could cut 2 at a time or whatever. What I like to do is to just give myself a little bit extra, cut bigger than the piece. So if I was cutting a 5x5 square, I would cut maybe 6x6 and quilt that. That's probably a really small piece that you'd want to quilt, but that was just an example, right, of what to cut bigger, because quilting can shift and move during the process, and so you want it to be bigger than you need so that when you go to cut it, you can cut it exactly the size you need. So I would recommend maybe doing, I don't think you need more than 1 inch bigger than the pieces in the pattern if you're wanting to cut them smaller to quilt. So absolutely you can do that, and I think that that's great. And for I know for sure, let me look at these patterns real quick. The violet backpack, I'm pretty sure that there's extra fabric like built in if you wanted to do that. I don't think you would have a problem. Yeah, you would definitely not have a problem adding extra to that. Let me look at the Archie backpack real quick. I think the Archie backpack's a little bit closer, but also in the Archie backpack, because you're quilting a yard, I do have the pieces laid out in the cutting diagram, so you can quilt 2 half yards. So then you wouldn't have to quilt a yard, right? Because you can make 2 half yard quilt sandwiches and quilt them like that if you're making the bigger backpack, which I think is really helpful, because I know quilting a yard of fabric is a lot. It is smaller than like most quilts, so if you're accustomed to quilting quilts on your sewing machine, maybe you're like, I've got this. I don't usually quilt on my sewing machine, so I'm going to for you, because I love you guys. I'm going to show you. It's possible, and it's not too hard. Someone asked what basting spray. So this is June Taylor's Quilt Basting Spray. I've used this one. I've also used the, I'm going to say it wrong, 405, 503, 403. I can't remember the number. There's another spray base. Does someone know? Tell me in the comments what that spray base. I've used that one too, and that one's great. Okay, I'm quilting on my domestic so I can cut my pieces individually, oversized. Had to Frankenstein one piece of soft and stable, and it's totally not noticeable. That is such a great 505. Thank you guys. The 505 spray is great as well. And yes, I'm so glad you mentioned that too, because I usually like to share that as well. If you have scraps of soft and stable, what I like to do to put those together, I'm going to reshare a reel that I have too, that I've done that. I just like to cut a fresh edge on 2 sides and put them right next to each other, but those 2 pieces next to each other, and I like to cut a 2-inch piece of SF101 fusible interfacing and just iron it on both sides, and it keeps it right together, and then once you quilt it, it will be great, and you won't even notice it. And that's such a great way to use up those scraps of soft and stable, because I know it's a pricier interfacing, but it's worth it. It's worth it. So thank you. You guys are doing so good at helping me cover all of the things for the content for this. Okay, so I wanted to talk about marking our quilting lines. So some of my favorite tools, which I've already shared in past lives, is this air erasing sew line marker. So I really love this one. This is like a felt tip marker, and it comes on like purple. It draws like purple, like a light purple on there. I love this marking tool. So if you're marking lines, if you're like, I'm going to do crosshatch and I'm going to mark my lines, this is great. The one downside of this, if you decide to mark all your lines and then you get distracted by your 4-year-old, which often happens with me, and then you come back to your sewing machine an hour later, they'll probably be gone. So mark your lines when you have time to quilt. This is my other favorite marking tool. This is the Clover chalk marker. I share this too. I love this so much, especially if I'm using darker fabrics. I only recommend the white. They have lots of colors. I only like the white. I find it's the only one that really comes out the easiest. And I'm going to draw this on my, let's see. I usually draw right on my finger. We'll see if you can see it. It's like a fine chalk line, which I really like. It's pretty fine, which I think is great, and usually it kind of like puffs away as you quilt your fabric, which I really like too, because then I don't have to spend any time trying to get the chalk to erase. If your sewing machine has one of these are sewing guides. Most sewing machines have these, and most people, we shouldn't say most people, a lot of people don't know what they are for, but these are sewing guides. So if you're like, I want to do 1-inch cross hatching on my bag, like this one, you could mark one line with your ruler using your 45-degree line. So I brought these rulers. These are my favorite rulers, Creative Grids rulers. They have lots of marking lines on them, which you're not going to be able to see on screen probably, but they have a 45-degree line. So I like to line that up on the edge of my fabric and then mark one line. So if I mark one line with this and then take that to my sewing machine and sew it, then I can stick this into my sewing machine and adjust it. I use my ruler and mark it 1 inch in or whatever, and then you can use that for your 1-inch line and then just follow your quilting lines one direction, and then go take it and mark your other 45-degree line and mark the other direction, right? So then when you sew, you're just like following right on this line here. These things are awesome. They are awesome. If you have a walking foot on your sewing machine, use it. I think quilting anything, if you have a walking machine or walking foot on your sewing machine, use it. It will just be so much more helpful. I often forget to share that in lives because I sew with a FOF Performance Icon, and I've been sewing on it for probably close to 7 years. And it has a built-in walking foot. The FOF sewing machines have the built-in IDT foot, and I have used that for the last, 20 years. And I love it for that reason, that it's like it's always engaged, and I feel like it helps a lot. So walking feet are very important, especially when doing your quilting. Okay, you could use a Hera marker. Have you ever used a Hera marker? These things are awesome. This is my custom-made Hera marker from Modern American Vintage. I love Chris's tools. They're beautifully made, and they're beautiful. So, but if you, let's see, I'll just like mark a line on this real quick and show you how awesome it is. We'll see. See if I can make it show up and then show up on screen too. But this is just like it's not a sharp edge, super sharp, right? You can just use it to mark right on your fabric. So can you see that line? You probably won't even be able to see it, but I don't even think you can see it. But this is great for marking your lines. You can use these for marking your lines. I also wanted to show this because I've never done this, but I have seen people do this, and I think that it looks amazing as well. You can use like painter's tape. I'm just going to show you. I'm going to tape this right onto my bag to show you. If you're like, I want to just like mark one line with that, you could use that and follow that line, and that would be a really easy, straight way to mark your line as well. Painter's tape. So there's lots of methods for marking your lines in quilting. I find the easiest, the go-to quilting patterns that I do when I'm quilting on my domestic is crosshatch or grid. A crosshatch or grid or straight lines, because I like all of those. But like I said, if you have a fabric that you can follow the pattern, that's always fun to do. I'm trying to think if there's any others here that I quilted this one on my domestic, and I added a quilt block, so I quilted around that block. So there's lots of different things you can do for quilting on your bags. I think the rest of these ones are all done on a long arm, but I'm going to share videos on quilting. I'm trying to think what else. Is that it? I think that's it for the quilting. If you have questions on the quilting, let me know. Am I frozen? Someone said frozen. I hope the video is not frozen. Anyways, okay. And last thing I wanted to share, cutting. Okay, so when we're cutting, after we have our fabric all quilted, we're going to cut it out. And if you don't have a ruler that is bigger, I guess we should talk about cutting. So cutting, you can cut off of your mat. I was taught when I started working at a quilt shop that your rulers are more accurate than cutting off of your mat. So for years and years, I cut off my rulers. So that is why I am a ruler collector, because I need a ruler for every size of everything, right? So I cut off of my ruler, especially when I'm cutting bags. I think with cutting like the quilted fabric, I feel like it's easier to just like lay the ruler down and cut the piece that I need, rather than try to like, anyways, that's just the way my brain works now, because that's what I do. But some of these pieces are big, right? Like this piece on the Archie backpack is kind of big, and you may or may not have a ruler that's this big, right? It's 17, I think it's 17 inches. I can't remember the width. But if you don't have a ruler big enough to cut, what I like to do is just lay two rulers together. I like to butt my rulers up next to each other and get the size that I need. So I wanted to share that my new favorite ruler is this ruler from Creative Grids. I know it has a name, but I don't think it says it on here. But this one is 12.5 by 24.5. So I have a 6.5 by 24 and an 8.5 by 24, and now I have a 12.5 by 24, and I use all of them. I love all of them. But this has been so awesome for bag making, cutting. Like, I really love how wide it is. So for like the Violet backpack, it's like 9 and something. I can't remember, and I just cut it out. But my 8.5 inch ruler isn't big enough, right? So I really love having this one to cut. So I'm not saying go buy a new ruler. I'm just saying I love this one if you are in the market for a new ruler. And if if you're cutting a piece that's bigger than you need, you can just butt these up next to each other, and that is so helpful. To just like butt the two rulers up next to each other. I just grabbed this one, but I have like another long one, so then I could like get the width I need. Or sometimes like the bias binding squares are 17 inches square. I have a 20.5-inch ruler that I love as well, but you can just butt your rulers up next to each other and cut, and that is great, and that works great too. So I just wanted to share that. I'm so glad that was helpful. Someone said I would have not thought to butt the rulers up, so thank you. You're welcome. I'm happy to share these. This is why we do the lives. Hopefully we're covering things that are just new and hopefully helpful. So that's what we have today. I'm really excited to finally get to the point of like sewing these bags and doing the quilting. So I will be posting this replay. If there's tips here that you like, let us know which ones you're going to try out. And I'm so excited to be sewing along with you. We have over 1,100 of you signed up for the sew along. So it's so exciting to be sewing backpacks with so many of you. I'm so glad that so many of you are posting your progress. So be sure to tag me. I'd love to see what you're doing. And like I said, I'm still working on my fussy cuts for the Archie backpack. I'll be quilting my violet backpack hopefully today, if not tomorrow, and I'll be sharing videos of that as well. So thanks so much for tuning in. You guys have just been so fun. It's always so fun to do a sew along and to create with so many of you. So that's what we've got today. So I hope you have a great week, and I will talk to you guys next week.